I first met Allison 8 months ago, at a tech conference in downtown Manhattan. With her sharp wit and ambitious personality, she seemed perfect for me. We connected instantly, and things moved quickly. But lately, something felt off about our relationship. Small signs I kept dismissing. Nothing prepared me for what happened at that fateful dinner at Le Bernardin, where she suddenly expected me to pay a $2,000 bill to impress her friends. I never imagined I would find myself in such a humiliating situation. Before I tell you what happened that night at Le Bernardin, drop a comment telling me if you have ever been financially ambushed in a relationship, and subscribe if you want more stories about standing up for yourself when someone takes advantage of your kindness. Looking back, I should have noticed the red flags. I am Herbert, a 30-year-old software engineer working at a promising startup in New York City. My job pays well enough for me to live comfortably in my modest one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, but I am far from wealthy by Manhattan standards. I work hard, save diligently, and splurge occasionally on tech gadgets that bring me joy. I met Allison at a blockchain technology seminar last spring. She was 28, confident, and worked as a marketing coordinator for a luxury brand. Her knowledge of the tech industry impressed me almost as much as her smile. After the seminar, we struck up a conversation about the potential applications of blockchain in retail, which led to coffee, which led to dinner, which led to us dating. The first few months were blissful. We would spend weekends exploring hidden corners of Central Park, cooking elaborate meals in my small kitchen, and sharing our dreams under the stars on my rooftop. Allison was affectionate, supportive, and seemed genuinely interested in my work and passions. I felt understood and valued for who I was. By our third month together, I had already begun envisioning a future with her. I introduced her to my parents during their visit from Ohio, and they adored her. She took me to meet her family in Connecticut, and they welcomed me warmly. Her father, a high school principal, and I bonded over our shared love for classic science fiction. Everything seemed to be falling into place. However, subtle changes began appearing in our relationship. Allison started mentioning her friends more frequently in our conversations. Not just any friends, but specifically her wealthy and successful friends from college. Jessica, the marketing director at a global cosmetics brand. Michael, the hedge fund manager with a penthouse in Tribeca. Samantha, the corporate lawyer, who apparently billed at $900 an hour. James, the plastic surgeon, with a practice on the Upper East Side. At first I thought nothing of it. Everyone talks about their friends, right? But gradually the mentions became more frequent and pointed. She would casually drop comments like, "Michael just bought another vacation property in the Hamptons. I cannot wait for you to see it this summer." Or, "Jessica said the new Rolex collection is stunning. Have you ever thought about investing in a good timepiece?" When I would reply that a vacation rental would be more my speed than a property purchase, or that my trusty Seiko served me perfectly well, Allison would smile tightly and quickly. Change the subject. These moments were brief, but left me feeling slightly inadequate, a feeling I had never experienced before in our relationship. One evening, as we were enjoying takeout, Thai food in my apartment, Allison brought up the topic of her friends again. "They are dying to meet you, you know," she said, pushing her pad thai around on her plate. "I have told them so much about you. I would love to meet them too," I replied sincerely. "Maybe we could organize a casual barbecue here on the rooftop. The weather is getting nice." Allison looked horrified for a split second before composing herself. "Oh, that is sweet, Herbert, but they are more the fine dining type. Besides, I have kind of already told them about how successful your startup is doing." I frowned. "What do you mean? We just secured our first round of funding, but I am still just a regular engineer there." She waved dismissively. "I might have mentioned that you are one of the key engineers leading the project, that your contribution was essential to securing the funding." While technically true, her framing made it sound like I was practically a founder or executive, which was far from reality. "Allison, I hope you have not given them the impression that I am some tech millionaire," I said, trying to keep my tone light despite my growing concern. She laughed a little too loudly. "Of course not. I just want them to see how amazing you are. They can be a bit judgmental sometimes." The conversation moved on, but the discomfort lingered. Over the next few weeks, Allison continued to press the issue of meeting her friends, suggesting increasingly upscale venues that made me quietly anxious about my budget. Eventually, she announced she had made reservations at Le Bernardin, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, to introduce me to her inner circle. "It will be perfect," she gushed. Just the 6 of us. You, me, Jessica, Michael, Samantha, and James. Next Friday at 8. The reservation was already made. The date was set, and somehow I found myself agreeing, pushing aside my financial concerns in favor of making Allison happy. It was just one night after all. We could split the bill, and I could dip into my savings just this once. What I did not realize then was that this dinner would become the most expensive lesson I would ever learn about love, worth, and self-respect. The week leading up to the dinner was when things really started to shift. Suddenly, Allison became hyper-focused on how I would present myself to her friends. She came over to my apartment and went through my closet, frowning at my collection of casual button-downs and the one suit I kept for interviews and weddings. "This will not do," she declared, closing my closet door with a decisive click. "We need to get you something more impressive." The next day she took me shopping and insisted on buying me an expensive designer suit that cost more than my monthly rent. When I expressed concern about the price, she brushed it off. "It is an investment in our future," she said, as the sales associate wrapped up the charcoal gray Tom Ford suit. First impressions matter with this crowd. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. What exactly did she mean by investment in our future? And why did her friends' opinions suddenly matter so much? The night before the dinner, Allison came over to my place for what I thought would be a relaxing evening. Instead, she spent hours coaching me on what to say and what not to say to her friends. "Do not mention that you take the subway to work," she instructed while pacing my living room. "If they ask about travel, focus on our trip to Montreal, not your backpacking days in college. And please do not bring up your action figure collection." I sat on the couch feeling increasingly uneasy. "Allison, these people are your friends." "Should not. They like me for who I am." She stopped pacing and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of frustration and determination. "Herbert, you do not understand. These people are not just friends. They are connections. Networking. They can open doors for both of us." "I thought we were introducing me as your boyfriend, not as a business contact," I said quietly. She sat beside me and took my hands in hers. Her tone softened, but her grip was tight. "Of course you are my boyfriend, and I am so proud to be with you. I just need you to make a good impression. These people are important to me. You need to impress my friends. They are very particular about who I date." That phrase, "you need to impress," my friends echoed in my mind long after Allison left that evening. I called my best friend David, who had known me since college. "Sounds like she is more concerned with how you look to her friends than who you actually are," David said bluntly after I explained the situation. "Be careful, man. I have seen this before. Some people date resumes, not people." His words unsettled me, but I pushed the feeling aside. Surely David was exaggerating. Allison loved me for me, not for what I could offer her socially or financially. Right. The day of the dinner arrived, and my anxiety peaked when I looked up Le Bernardin online. It was consistently ranked among the most expensive restaurants in New York, with a tasting menu starting at $250 per person, not including wine pairings. I called Allison in a panic. "This place is really expensive," I said. "Are you sure we cannot go somewhere more moderate?" "Relax," she replied. "We will split everything. Besides, this dinner is really important for our future. Trust me." There was that phrase again. Our future. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling that Allison and I might have very different visions of what that future looked like. That evening I put on the new suit, feeling like an imposter. The fabric was undeniably luxurious. But as I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked like someone playing dress-up, trying to be something I was not. Still, I reminded myself this was just one night. I would meet her friends, be polite and engaging, and then things would go back to normal. I arrived at the restaurant 10 minutes early and waited nervously in the elegant lobby. Allison arrived with her friends as a group, all of them dressed impeccably. She introduced me with a proud smile, but I immediately noticed something off in her demeanor. She was speaking differently, her usually relaxed speech pattern replaced with what I can only describe as an affected upper-class accent. "Everyone, this is Herbert," she announced. "The brilliant engineer I have been telling you all about." As we were led to our table, I could feel their eyes on me, assessing, judging. We had not even sat down yet, and I already felt like I was failing some unspoken test. The dinner started pleasantly enough on the surface, but quickly devolved into what felt like an interrogation disguised as casual conversation. We were seated at a prime table in the elegant dining room of Le Bernardin, surrounded by soft lighting and the gentle clink of expensive crystal. Jessica, the marketing director, sat directly across from me. Her sleek bob and calculating eyes reminded me of Miranda Priestly from The Devil Wears Prada. "So, Herbert," she began, "Allison tells us you are practically running the engineering department at your startup. How many people report to you now?" Before I could correct this exaggeration, Allison jumped in. "Herbert is too modest. He is instrumental to the entire operation. They just secured $5 million in funding largely because of his innovative work." I shifted uncomfortably. While our startup had indeed secured funding, it was nowhere near $5 million, and my role, while important, was just one of many engineers contributing to the project. Michael, the hedge fund manager, barely looked up from the wine list. "Good vintage years here. The '97 Chateau Margaux is exceptional if they still have it. Shall we start with that?" Without waiting for agreement, he signaled the sommelier and ordered a bottle that I later discovered was priced at $800. My heart sank as I watched him order a second bottle minutes after the first was opened with the casual flick of his hand that spoke of someone who never needed to check prices. "Herbert, Samantha," the lawyer interjected, leaning forward with practiced interest. "What do you drive?" "I just upgraded to the new Tesla Model S Plaid. The acceleration is simply unreal." "I actually do not drive much in the city," I replied honestly. "Between the subway and walking." Allison cut me off with a laugh that sounded nothing like her usual warm chuckle. "Herbert is considering the new BMW are not you, darling. He is just so practical, always researching before making decisions." I stared at her, stunned by the blatant lie. We had never discussed me buying a car, let alone a luxury BMW. James, the plastic surgeon, barely engaged with me directly, instead focusing on regaling the table with stories of celebrities who had visited his practice, dropping names I recognized from magazines and movies. Throughout the dinner, Allison was like a stranger. The woman who had once spent an entire Sunday helping me build a computer from scratch, her hair tied back in a messy ponytail as we troubleshot RAM issues, was now pretending she knew the difference between beluga and Osetra caviar. The woman who had laughed uncontrollably at my terrible jokes now only offered practiced restrained smiles at the cutting remarks her friends made. The most painful part was watching how she changed her story about me with each passing course. My small but comfortable Brooklyn apartment became a charming space Herbert keeps, while looking for the right property investment. My mid-level engineering position transformed into leading the technical division. My weekend volunteering at a coding camp for underprivileged kids was reframed as strategic networking with the next generation of tech talent. I felt myself disappearing, replaced by this fictional character Allison had created to impress her friends. With each fabrication, I grew more withdrawn, contributing less to the conversation. No one seemed to notice or care. The friends ordered extravagantly, selecting the most expensive items on the menu without consultation. Rare seafood towers, premium Wagyu beef supplements, truffle additions to already costly dishes. Their casual disregard for money was stunning to witness. "We simply must try the caviar flight," Jessica insisted, signaling the waiter before anyone could object. "And let us add the wine pairings for each course," Michael added. "Life is too short for mediocre pairings." I watched in mounting horror as the bill silently grew with each careless addition. Allison, rather than moderating or acknowledging my discomfort, encouraged their excess. "Herbert loves experiencing new things," she said, squeezing my arm while avoiding my eyes. "He is always saying how important it is to appreciate the finer things in life." As the dinner progressed, I realized with growing clarity that I was not a participant in this evening. I was a prop. A prop in Allison's carefully orchestrated performance designed to elevate her status among these people she so desperately wanted to impress. The final straw came when, after nearly 3 hours of this charade, Michael suggested they all continue the evening at an exclusive club in the meatpacking district. "They just reopened the VIP section," he explained, checking his watch. "If we leave now, we can skip the line. 500 minimum spend per table. But the champagne selection makes it worth every penny." "That sounds amazing," Allison gushed, not even glancing in my direction. "Herbert and I were just saying we wanted to check out more exclusive spots in the city." At that moment, with perfect dramatic timing, The waiter appeared with a small leather folder. "The bill, sir," he said, placing it discreetly next to Michael. Michael picked it up, glanced inside, and with a practiced motion, slid it across the table directly to me. "I believe this is yours, Herbert," he said with the faintest smile. "Allison mentioned you wanted to treat tonight." I stared at the leather folder for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. With deliberate calm that masked my internal panic, I opened it to find a bill for $1,976. Almost exactly $2,000 for a single dinner. The table had gone completely silent. 5 pairs of eyes were fixed on me, watching for my reaction. I looked up to find Allison avoiding my gaze, her cheeks flushed. "You need to pay," she whispered, leaning close enough that only I could hear. "I told them you would take care of it." The words hit me like a physical blow. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. The expensive suit, the coaching, the lies about my job and finances. It had all been building to this moment where I was expected to prove my worth with my wallet. Michael raised an eyebrow. "Allison told us you just closed a big funding round. This should be pocket change, right?" I looked at Allison, silently pleading for her to say something, to acknowledge. This was all a terrible misunderstanding. Instead, she gave me a tight smile and a barely perceptible nod, as if encouraging me to play along with her charade. I would split it, but I seemed to have left my card at my other vacation home. James joked, eliciting polite laughter from everyone except me. My mind raced through my options. My checking account had maybe $1,200 in it. My credit card limit was $3,000, which would cover this. But then I would struggle to make rent next week. I could feel my face burning with a mixture of humiliation and dawning anger. "Herbert," Allison whispered urgently, "do not embarrass me like this. Just pay the bill and we can discuss it later." That was the moment I fully understood I had never been a boyfriend to Allison. I had been an accessory, a financial stepping stone, a ticket to the social circle she so desperately wanted to remain in. Jessica leaned forward, her voice dripping with condescension. "Is there a problem with the bill? I am sure the restaurant takes payment plans if necessary." She exchanged a knowing glance with Samantha, who poorly concealed a smirk behind her wine glass. Perhaps Allison should find someone more established. Samantha added quietly but loudly enough for me to hear. The final pieces clicked into place. This had been a test, one that Allison had set me up to fail. These people were not just judging me, they were actively rooting for my failure. And Allison, the woman I had trusted with my heart, had orchestrated the whole humiliating spectacle. In that moment of clarity, something shifted within me. The panic subsided, replaced by a calm resolve I had not known I possessed. I had been manipulated and lied to, but I did not have to accept the role they had cast me in. I picked up the bill, looked at it carefully one more time, and to everyone's surprise, including my own, I smiled. "No problem at all," I said, my voice steady and clear in the hushed silence that had fallen over our table. 5 pairs of eyes widened in surprise at my apparent capitulation. Allison visibly relaxed relief, washing over her features. Michael and Jessica exchanged glances that mingled disappointment with grudging acceptance. They had expected me to crumble, to reveal myself as the imposter they believed me to be. My apparent willingness to pay had thrown them off script. But I was not following their script anymore. I was writing my own ending to this farce. I signaled to our waiter, who promptly returned to the table. "How may I help you, sir?" he asked politely. "I would like to clarify something about our dining arrangement tonight," I said, maintaining my composed smile. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding about the bill." Allison tensed beside me, her fingernails digging into my thigh under the table in warning. I gently removed her hand. "It was my understanding that we would be splitting the bill equally among all diners." I continued, looking directly at the waiter. "Could you please divide the total by 5 and process separate payments for each person at the table?" The waiter, a consummate professional, did not bat an eye. "Of course, sir. That would be $395.20 per person. How would everyone like to pay?" The atmosphere at the table transformed instantly. Allison gasped audibly. Michael's confident demeanor faltered, his mouth opening and closing without producing words. Jessica's perfectly manicured hand froze midair, the wine glass she had been raising suspended between table and lips. "There must be some mistake," Samantha said, her lawyer instincts kicking in. Allison assured us that Herbert was treating everyone tonight, as a celebration of his recent success. I turned to face Allison, who was now pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. I am just a software engineer, not a CEO. I never claimed to be rich or successful beyond my actual achievements. I never offered to pay for everyone tonight. But you said. Allison began, panic evident in her voice. I never said anything of the sort, I interrupted calmly. You said those things about me. You created a fictional version of me to impress your friends. That person does not exist. Michael attempted to regain control of the situation. Look, there has obviously been some confusion. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. There is nothing to discuss, I replied. I am happy to pay for my portion of the meal. I assume everyone else is equally capable of paying for what they ordered and consumed. James, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. He is right. We all ate, we all should pay. To my surprise, he pulled out his wallet and handed the waiter his credit card. My share, please. One by one, with varying degrees of reluctance, and shock cards were produced. Michael tried once more to object, suggesting we put the entire bill on Allison's card and sort it out later. But the waiter had already begun processing the separate payments. Allison looked mortified, her carefully constructed social facade crumbling as her friends witnessed her deception unravel in real time. Herbert, how could you do this to me? She whispered furiously. I could ask you the same question, I replied quietly, making sure only she could hear. How could you set me up like this? How could you lie about who I am, what I earn, what I can afford? Did you ever actually care about me? Or was I just a potential sponsor for your lifestyle? Her silence was all the answer I needed. After everyone had paid their portion, an uncomfortable silence descended on the table. The earlier camaraderie had evaporated, replaced by thinly veiled animosity. Michael abruptly announced he had an early meeting the next day, canceling the club plans. Jessica and Samantha quickly followed suit with their own excuses. As they gathered their belongings to leave, I stood up. It was interesting meeting you all, I said. I hope you enjoyed the meal you paid for. Without waiting for a response, I walked out of the restaurant alone, leaving Allison with the friends she had tried so hard to impress at my expense. The cool night air hit my face as I emerged onto the street, and I took my first full breath in hours. I loosened the tie of my expensive new suit, a costume I would never wear again. Despite the financial hit of nearly $400 for a single meal, I felt lighter than I had in months. I had paid a high price, but I had kept something far more valuable, my dignity. The aftermath of that dinner unfolded in a predictable pattern. My phone lit up with messages from Allison, starting with anger, transitioning to tearful apologies, and finally settling into desperate pleas for a second chance. I read them all, but responded to none. The next morning, she appeared at my apartment door, eyes red from crying, clutching a coffee from my favorite local shop as a peace offering. I let her in more out of a desire for closure than any inclination toward reconciliation. I can explain everything, she began, her voice quavering. My friends, they put so much pressure on me. I got caught up in trying to impress them, to keep up with their lifestyles. I never meant to hurt you. I listened as she unraveled the tangled web of insecurities and social climbing that had defined our relationship. How she had always felt inadequate around her college friends who had gone on to high-paying careers while she struggled in the competitive world of marketing. How dating me had initially been about genuine connection, but had gradually transformed into an opportunity to elevate her status among her peers. When they started asking about you, I just wanted them to be impressed, she admitted. One small exaggeration led to another, and suddenly I was trapped in this narrative I had created. I convinced myself that if they accepted you, accepted us, everything would work out. You were willing to put me in debt to maintain your social standing, I said quietly. You lied about who I am to people who do not even matter in our lives. How could I ever trust you again? I will change, she promised, tears streaming down her face. I do not need those friends. I do not need expensive dinners or designer clothes. I just need you. But the words rang hollow. The Allison I thought I knew, the woman I had fallen in love with, had never really existed. She had been playing a role from the beginning, trying on different personas like outfits, until she found one that fit her social aspirations. I want someone who values me for who I am, not what they can get from me, or how I make them look to others, I told her. I deserve that. Everyone does. She left my apartment that day knowing our relationship was over. The expensive suit she had bought me remained hanging in my closet, tags still attached. I would later donate it to a program that provided professional attire to job seekers who could not afford interview clothes. The most surprising aftermath came 3 days later when I received a text message from an unknown number. It was James, the plastic surgeon from the dinner. "I have been in a similar situation," his message read. "What you did took courage. For what it is worth, the rest of us have been subjected to Allison's boyfriend tests before. You are the first one who stood up for himself. Respect." I was taken aback by this revelation. Boyfriend tests. "She has brought several guys to dinners like that over the years," he explained. "Usually they either pay to show off, go into debt trying to impress, or crumble under the pressure. You did neither. You handled it with dignity." This information should have made me feel better, knowing I was just one in a line of potential sponsors Allison had auditioned. Instead, it left me feeling hollow thinking about the others who might have been manipulated as I had been. In the months that followed, I focused on healing. I poured my energy into my work, eventually earning a genuine promotion based on my actual skills and contributions. I joined a support group for people who had experienced financial abuse in relationships, surprised to find how common my experience was. I made new friends through a local hiking club, people who appreciated simple pleasures and authentic connections. We enjoyed affordable adventures exploring state parks and local trails, finding more joy in those experiences than I had ever found in Allison's world of performance and pretense. The dinner at Le Bernardin had cost me nearly $400, a significant sum for my budget at the time. But it had saved me from investing years and untold thousands in a relationship built on deception and materialism. In that sense, it was the best money I had ever spent. 6 months after that fateful night, I met Lauren, an elementary school teacher with a passion for science education. On our first date, we went to a science museum, followed by hot dogs from a street vendor. When she got mustard on her shirt, she laughed instead of being embarrassed. When I told her about my actual job and modest apartment, she asked thoughtful questions about my work rather than what car I drove or where I vacationed. That dinner bill was the most expensive lesson I have ever paid for, but it taught me something priceless. When someone tries to put a price tag on your worth, the most valuable thing you can do is walk away with your dignity intact. If you have ever been made to feel like your value as a person depends on your wallet or what you can provide materially, remember that true connection cannot be bought. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who was using you for status or financial gain? Share your story in the comments below. Hit that like button if this resonated with you, and subscribe for more real-life lessons learned the hard way. Thanks for listening. And remember, your worth is not determined by your net worth.